If you love great stories, you've come to the right place. Subscribe to my channel to make sure you don't miss any new videos. Like and share this video with your friends if you enjoyed it, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. The victory at the Blackwater had bought Cersei Lannister time, but it had not bought her peace. The Red Keep had been transformed into a sprawling factory of war. The silence of Highgarden, the absolute annihilation of the Tyrells, had provided the gold, but now that gold was being converted into a more volatile currency, wildfire and iron. Cersei stood on the scorched docks of King's Landing, watching the departure of the Lannister fleet. These were not the elegant ships of the Reach or the storied galleys of the Royal Navy. These were heavy, ironclad monsters, their hulls reinforced by Qyburn's designs to carry the massive weight of the Green Rain canisters. The soldiers boarding them did not sing. They moved with the mechanical precision of men who knew they were serving a queen who viewed them as expendable fuel. "The gold has been distributed to the Golden Company," Qyburn said, walking beside her. His robes were stained with the chemicals of the laboratory, and his eyes were sunken from lack of sleep. 20,000 mercenaries have landed at the mouth of the Trident. They bring elephants, your grace, though I fear the beasts may not survive the northern cold. "The elephants are for show, Qyburn," Cersei said, her voice sharp and cold. "They are meant to remind the world that I can command the exotic and the impossible. My real strength is in the sky." She looked up. Tywin, Joffrey, and Miachella were circling the great wall of the city. Their wounds from the battle with Daenerys' dragons had healed into jagged, thick scars that made them look even more monstrous. Joffrey's wing, stitched with dragon bone, now had a slight, uneven twitch in its flight, but the dragons seemed to have channeled that deformity into a more erratic, unpredictable violence. "Are the containers secure?" Cersei asked. "They are, your grace. The alchemists have refined the wildfire to be more stable during flight. We have dubbed it the Lion's Breath. It is enough to turn the frozen wastes of the north into a boiling sea of green." As Cersei prepared for her departure, she was haunted not by guilt, but by the logistical ghost of her victory. The silence of Highgarden was not just a metaphor, it was a reality that was beginning to starve the city. By destroying the Reach, Cersei had cut off the food supply for the capital. In the throne room, a group of minor lords from the Crownlands knelt before the Iron Throne. They were gaunt, their eyes hollow with hunger. "Your Grace," Lord Stokeworth pleaded, his voice trembling. "The people are eating their horses, the grain from the Reach. It never arrived. The fields were burned by the dragons. We have the gold you gave us, but gold cannot be baked into bread." Cersei looked down at him from the heights of the throne. She felt a flicker of annoyance. These men were still thinking of the world in terms of harvests and winters. They didn't understand that the world had changed. "You have gold," Cersei said, her voice echoing in the silent hall. "Use it to buy grain from the free cities. Use it to buy fish from the Iron Islands. If you are hungry, Lord Stokeworth, it is because you lack the imagination to find a new way to fill your belly." "But the blockades, your grace, the Targaryen ships." "The Targaryen ships are splinters at the bottom of the Blackwater," Cersei roared, standing up. The dragon Tywin Asterisk, who was resting in the shadows behind the throne, let out a low, vibrating growl that made the lords press their faces into the floor. "I have given you security. I have given you a world without the Tyrell vipers or the sparrow's madness. If you cannot find food, then perhaps you are too weak to live in the world I am building." She signaled to the guards. "Take them away. Give them a loaf of bread each from the royal stores and tell them it is the last mercy they will receive from this throne." Late that night, Cersei met with the commander of the Golden Company, Harry Strickland. He was a man of business, a mercenary who cared for nothing but the contract. "The Silver Queen and the Stark boy believe we are marching north to join them," Cersei said, pointing to the map of Winterfell. "They expect us to arrive at the 11th hour to save them from the Night King. Let them believe it. I want my fleet to stay out of sight, tucked into the inlets of the Fingers, until the battle begins." "And if the dead win before we arrive?" Strickland asked, his hand on the hilt of his gilded sword. "The dead cannot win against 3 dragons and 20,000 fresh troops," Cersei said, though she didn't truly believe it. She didn't care who won the first round. If the dead win, they will be thinned out. If the living win, they will be broken. Either way, when the sun rises over the snow, they will look up and see the golden wings. That is when you strike. You kill anything that breathes. You kill anything that doesn't. She walked to the window and looked toward the north. She could almost feel the cold wind beginning to bite at the walls of King's Landing. Jaime is already there, she whispered to herself. Your Grace, Qyburn asked. Nothing. He chose his side. He chose the living. He will find that life is a very brief and painful thing when it is caught between ice and fire. She turned back to the room, her emerald eyes cold and resolute. Prepare the dragons. We fly at dawn. The silence of Highgarden was just the beginning. By the time I am finished, the only sound in the north will be the crackle of green fire on white snow. The part ends with a cinematic sequence of the Lannister mobilization. Thousands of jars of wildfire are being lowered into the holds of ships, handled with the terrifying care of a religious ritual. On the battlements, Cersei climbs onto Tywin's back. She looks out over her city, a city she has starved, terrified, and transformed. She doesn't feel a shred of regret. She feels the power of the beast beneath her, the weight of the gold in her coffers, and the absolute certainty of her own path. Dracarys, she whispers, testing the word on her tongue. It felt better when she said it. It felt like her own. Tywin let out a burst of golden flame that lit up the entire Red Keep, and as the three dragons took flight toward the north, the screen fades to a pale, sickly green. The lioness was going to the land of always winter, and she was bringing the sun with her, a sun made of wildfire and hate. The transition from the scorched plains of the Reach to the jagged, frozen peaks of the north was a journey through the dying breaths of the world. For Cersei, the flight was a sensory assault. The air, which had been thick with the smell of salt and sun in King's Landing, now became a razor, cutting through her heavy fur-lined dragon-riding leathers. High above the clouds, the moisture in the air froze instantly, coating Tywin's golden scales in a fine silver frost that made him shimmer like a ghost in the moonlight. Beside her, Joffrey and Miachella struggled with the sudden shift in atmosphere. The dragons were creatures of heat and wildfire, and the north was an affront to their very existence. Joffrey, his torn wings still stiff from Qyburn's stitches, let out a mournful, percussive shriek every few miles, the sound echoing off the desolate wastes of the neck. Steady, Cersei whispered, leaning forward so her breath warmed a small patch of Tywin's neck. The snow is just fuel we haven't burned yet. As they crossed the invisible line into the north, the landscape changed. It wasn't just the snow, it was the absence of life. From 1,000 feet up, Cersei looked down and saw a river of darkness flowing across the white expanse. It wasn't water, it was the army of the dead. It was a sight that would have broken a lesser mind. Hundreds of thousands of moving corpses, a silent, relentless tide of bone and rotted flesh. From this height, they looked like an infestation, a plague of locusts that had frozen mid-swarm. And in the center of that tide, Cersei saw the silhouettes of the White Walkers on their dead horses, their ice-blue eyes visible even from the sky like tiny, frozen stars. Cersei felt a primal shiver, but it wasn't fear. It was recognition. They don't want crowns, she realized, her voice lost to the wind. They don't want gold, they just want the end. They are the ultimate silence. She pulled Tywin into a steep bank, circling the edge of the dead host. She could see them now, the giants, the bears, the thousands of fallen wildlings. She felt a sudden, dark urge to unleash the wildfire right then, to see if the green rain could melt the Night King himself. But she stayed her hand. She needed the dead to do her work first. She needed them to break the Silver Queen and the Stark boy. Cersei did not land at Winterfell. She had no intention of being greeted by the living or answering for her crimes. Instead, she landed on a secluded, jagged ridge several miles south of the Stark stronghold, a place where the trees were thick and the shadows were long. As Tywin's massive claws gripped the frozen rock, sending shards of ice tumbling into the valley below, a figure emerged from the darkness of a nearby cave. He was wrapped in black furs, his face obscured by a hood, but Cersei recognized the way he stood, the arrogance of a man who thought he knew the secrets of the world. It was a spy she had sent ahead, a man who had once served in the Citadel and now served only the highest bidder. "The situation, Meister?" Cersei asked, not dismounting. "The living are desperate, Your Grace," the man replied, his breath blooming in the air like white smoke. "They have gathered every soul they can find, the Targaryen girl, the Stark boy, and your brother. They are planning a final stand at the walls of Winterfell. They expect the dead to hit them within 48 hours. And the dragons. The black one and the green one are wounded, just as you saw at the Blackwater. They are slow to heal in this cold. They are resting in the godswood, being fed the last of the salted meat." Cersei let out a soft, cruel laugh. "Good, and my honorable brother, is he leading the vanguard?" "He is. He spends his nights on the walls, staring toward the south. I believe he is still waiting for you, Your Grace. He believes you are coming to save them." Cersei felt a brief, sharp pang in her chest, the last flickering ember of the woman she used to be. She remembered James' face in the light of the sept, the way he looked at her before the world turned to fire. She pushed the memory into the dark. "Let him wait," she said. "He chose the living. He chose the losers. Tell my generals in the Golden Company to hold their position at the neck. We wait for the first roar of the dead. When the walls of Winterfell fall, that is when the lion takes the sky." Cersei spent the night on the ridge, huddled against Tywin's warm flank. The dragon was a living furnace in the frozen night, the heat of his body melting the snow for 10 yards in every direction. She watched the horizon, where the distant torches of Winterfell flickered like a dying firefly. She thought of Highgarden. She thought of the silence she had left behind, the charred roses, the empty vaults, the end of a legacy. She realized that she was doing the same to the north, but on a grander scale. She wasn't just killing enemies. She was erasing the very idea of a world that didn't belong to her. "The silence of Highgarden followed me here," she whispered to the golden dragon. "And when the sun rises, it will be the only song anyone remembers." Suddenly, the wind changed. It became colder, a cold so intense it seemed to freeze the very air in Cersei's lungs. Tywin stood up, his scales rattling like 1,000 shields. Joffrey and Miachella, perched on lower rocks, let out a synchronized, low-frequency growl that made the ground beneath them vibrate. From the north, a long, haunting shriek echoed through the sky. It wasn't the roar of a living dragon. It was the sound of ice cracking on a cosmic scale. Cersei looked up. High above the clouds, a pale blue light flickered. The Night King had arrived on his undead dragon. Cersei felt a surge of adrenaline so potent it was almost painful. She climbed into her harness, her fingers working the leather straps with mechanical precision. She wasn't going to fight the Night King, not yet. She was going to watch. She was going to be the silent observer of the end of days, waiting for the perfect moment to turn the frozen apocalypse into a gilded victory. "Look at him, Tywin," she said, pointing toward the blue glow. "He thinks he is the master of death. He doesn't realize that death is just a tool in the hands of a queen." As the dawn began to break, a pale, sickly gray light that offered no warmth, the first screams reached the ridge. The army of the dead had hit the trenches of Winterfell. Cersei could see the flashes of fire from the Targaryen dragons as they tried to hold the line. She could see the tiny, insignificant sparks of Valyrian steel as the living fought for their right to exist. It was a beautiful, terrible ballet of destruction. "Wait," she told her dragons as they strained against their perches, their instincts screaming at them to join the fray. "Not yet. Let them tire. Let them bleed. Let the Silver Queen use up her fire. We are the gilded debt, and we only collect when the price is highest." She is no longer a queen of men. She is a queen of the end. Her emerald eyes reflect the blue fire of the Night King and the orange fire of Daenerys, and in the center of her pupil, a small, golden lion seems to roar at the darkness. The silence of Highgarden had reached the north, and the harvest of ash was about to begin. The sky over Winterfell was a chaotic tapestry of nightmare. Below, the living were drowning in a sea of white walkers, the screams of the dying rising like a physical weight into the frozen air. High above, the Night King on his ice-blue dragon and Daenerys on the shadow of Drogon were locked in a dance of death. But in the clouds, Hidden by the thick, magical fog of the dead, Cersei Lannister watched it all. She felt the heat of Tywin beneath her, a stark contrast to the soul-chilling frost of the north. She watched as the Targaryen dragons, Regal and Viserion, struggled to breathe fire through the blizzard. She watched as the walls of Winterfell were breached, and the heroic stand of the Northmen turned into a desperate, bloody slaughter. "Now," Cersei whispered, her voice a jagged shard of ice, "let the help arrive." Cersei signaled Miechella and Joffrey. The two smaller dragons dived first. To the people on the ground, to Jaime, to Jon Snow, to Daenerys, it must have looked like a miracle. 3 golden shapes emerging from the gloom, roaring like the sun itself. For a heartbeat, the living cheered. They thought the Lannisters had come to save the world. The cheer died in their throats as the first canisters of the Lion's Breath fell. Cersei did not target the heart of the dead host. She targeted the trenches where the living were fighting. She targeted the gates where the northern lords were making their stand. The wildfire canisters shattered against the frozen ground, and in an instant, the white world turned a blinding, radioactive green. The wildfire didn't just burn the whites, it incinerated the living soldiers standing beside them. The green rain was indiscriminate. It turned the battlefield into a boiling cauldron of emerald liquid. Men screaming in Lannister red and Stark gray were turned into pillars of green flame, their bodies melting into the snow. "Cersei," a voice screamed from below. High on the battlements, Jaime Lannister was looking up, his face illuminated by the green glow. Even from this height, Cersei could see the moment his heart finally broke. He saw his sister, the woman he had died for 1,000 times, raining hell on his brothers in arms. Cersei didn't flinch. She pulled Tywin into a hover directly over the godswood. "Dracarys," she commanded. Tywin unleashed a golden-white flame that clashed with the green fire below. The heat was so intense that the ancient weirwood tree, the heart of the north, began to blacken and weep sap that looked like blood. Cersei wasn't just fighting a war, she was erasing a culture. She was imposing the silence of Highgarden on the entire world. The Night King, sensing a new predator, turned his undead dragon toward Cersei. At the same time, Daenerys, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated fury, steered Drogon toward the golden beast. It was a 3-way dogfight in the middle of a blizzard. The blue fire of the dead, the orange fire of the Targaryen, and the golden fire of the Lannister met in the center of the sky. The air itself seemed to crack under the pressure of the competing magics. Tywin was faster than the undead dragon and more agile than the wounded Drogon. Cersei used the erratic flight of the wildfire explosions to mask her movements. She dove beneath the Night King's beast, and as she passed, she released a specialized harpoon, a Valyrian steel-tipped spear coated in wildfire. The spear struck the undead dragon's wing, the wildfire igniting the rotted flesh. The Night King's mount screeched, a sound that shattered the glass in the Winterfell towers. But Cersei wasn't finished. As Drogon moved in to strike the Night King, Cersei dropped her final payload of wildfire directly in the path of the Targaryen dragon. "I am the only queen," Cersei screamed into the wind. The explosion forced Daenerys to veer off, her dragon's scales scorched by the green heat. In that moment of chaos, the Night King plunged into the godswood, and the tide of the dead began to shatter, not because of a hero's sword, but because the battlefield had become a lake of unquenchable Lannister fire. As the Night King fell and the dead began to crumble into piles of bone, the wildfire continued to roar. The battle was over, but the massacre was just beginning. Cersei landed Tywin in the center of the scorched courtyard of Winterfell. The ground was a sludge of melted snow, black ash, and green liquid. She dismounted, her boots stepping over the charred remains of a Stark banner. A lone figure stumbled out of the smoke. It was Jaime. His armor was melted in places, his face covered in soot and blood. He held his sword, but it was shaking. "You did it," Jaime said, his voice a whisper of pure agony. "You saved us by burning us all." "I saved the only thing that matters, Jaime," Cersei said, walking toward him. She looked at the ruins of Winterfell. The dead are gone. The Silver Queen is wounded in the forest. The Stark boy is a king of nothing. The world is mine. There is no world left, Jaime roared, stepping into the green light. Look at what you've done. You've turned the North into a grave. You've killed the men who fought for you. They died for a Lannister victory, Cersei said, reaching out to touch his face. Come home with me, Jaime. We have the gold. We have the dragons. We can build a new world in the south where the roses are gone and the snow is just a memory. Jaime looked into her emerald eyes. He didn't see his sister. He didn't see the woman he loved. He saw the same madness he had seen in the eyes of the Mad King. He saw the silence of Highgarden reflected in her gaze, a silence that would eventually consume everything. No, Jaime said. He dropped his sword into the slush. I won't be a part of your graveyard. He turned and walked away into the dark, frozen forest, toward the place where the survivors of the Targaryen and Stark forces were huddling in the cold. Cersei stood alone in the courtyard. She looked up at Tywin, who let out a low, satisfied rumble. She looked at the green flames dancing on the broken walls of Winterfell. She had won. She had betrayed the living, defeated the dead, and secured her throne. But as she stood in the center of the ruined north, she realized that the silence she had created was absolute. The castle is a black skeleton, glowing with a ghostly green fire. The 3 golden dragons perch on the highest points, their roars echoing across a land where nothing else moves. The silence of Highgarden had reached the end of the world. Thanks for watching this episode. Like, share, and follow for more interesting stories and narrations. Thanks a lot.